Good evening, everyone. My name is Marty Johannes, and I'm the Careers and Personal Finance Librarian for the Johnson County Library. Thanks for joining us this evening for this program about how to adjust your finances for retirement living. We'll have time for questions and answers after the presentation, so please put your comments and questions in the chat as they come to mind. Our presenter today is Emerson Hartzler. Emerson has had a distinguished career serving in executive positions with Touche Ross, Retirement Centers of America, and Cardiovascular Consultants. He earned an MBA with an emphasis in finance from the University of Iowa. When Emerson retired in 2007, he pursued a new career as a pro bono personal financial advisor for Triune Financial Partners for 8 years. He continues to maintain an independent pro bono financial practice. Since 2007, he has served over 350 individuals and families in the community, doing all of his work on a pro bono basis, i.e. without charge. Much of Emerson's work with clients involves helping them to plan and manage their income and expenses on a monthly basis so that over time they can achieve financial success. Emerson has been married for 60 years and has 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. Of all of his many accomplishments, he is most proud of his long-lasting marriage and his family. Emerson? Emerson, I may have muted you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, very good. Well,
wonderful.
Thanks for the introduction. Marty, my mother would be proud. Well, Marty and I were talking last fall about what we could do later in the winter or spring. And I was thinking about, well, gosh, I have been retired going on 15 years, so I should know something about retirement. And I've been working as a pro bono financial advisor to people for that same period. So I got 15 years experience in that. And so there ought to be something that I can share that would be meaningful. So we came up with this presentation to say, what do you do with your finances preparing for and adjusting to retirement living? And I put down then a number of things from my own personal life, and I hope you'll enjoy that. In my own case, it's kind of interesting. When I looked at the long-term future, my wife and I went to an estate planning attorney fairly early and planned out our estate. We didn't know how much money we would have. We were not wealthy at all at that time. But it was interesting. And I didn't engage any kind of financial planning expert until I retired. And as I look back to that, I think that was a mistake. I wish we had done that much earlier. In fact, I would recommend you go to a certified financial planner before you go to your estate planning attorney. Most people do it the other way. But once you've planned your finances, then you're better prepared to go to the estate planning attorney and plan what happens after your retirement. So I would recommend that different approach. Speaking of retirement, things have changed. Generations ago, planning for retirement was pretty simple. You basically worked all your life, you retired, and shortly thereafter, you were gone. And so the Social Security Administration was set up like that, anticipating that people would go to their just reward shortly after they retired. Well, today, and I'll show you a graph that illustrates that, the good news is that we live a long time after a normal retirement age. That's the good news. The bad news is we live a long time after retirement age. And unless you've planned for that, and unless you've adjusted for that as you go through the planning process over a number of years, then it might not turn out as well as you would like. At age 90, I have a lot of friends, age 90 or more. You've been in retirement for, say, 20, 25 years. I worked for 44 years. I might live in retirement for 30 years. When you think about that, earning money for 44 years and then not so much for the next 30, you better plan pretty well for that. One of my favorite slides is this one. I can't get it to, oh, there it is. Yeah, this is a little busy, but it does make a point that I wanted to make sure. This is a slide taken from another presentation. We'll talk about that later on. But this is a JP Morgan slide. It says if you're 65 today, normal retirement age, 66 now, the probability of living to a specific age or beyond 75 years, that's 10 years. If you're female, 86%, male 79, sorry guys, that's the way it is. If you are a couple, one of you has a 97% chance of living 10 years. Wow. Okay, well, that's great. But then if you move to 80, that would be 15 years, or 85, 20 years. Look at that. One of you has a 74% chance of still living after 25 years, or 20 years after retirement. And then you go to 90, 95. I got a lot of friends in that area. Even at 90 years, which is 25 years in retirement, almost half have almost a 50% probability of still being alive at 25 years. That's just amazing. So, the box here says average life expectancy continues to increase and is a midpoint, not an endpoint. You may need to plan on living as much longer, maybe 30 plus years in retirement and so forth. And they're talking about how to invest money with this chart. But I thought this was remarkable, how long, especially couples, one of them might live. So your planning horizon is a long one. So I kind of examined what I'd gone through the last 15 years and what I'm planning to do in the next 15 years or whatever the good Lord allows me. And I put down 9 decision points. And at each of these points, you may have some significant changes in your finances and you need to adjust what you're doing. And we'll give each of these 9 points some airtime this evening. And I've tried to put it into categories of age, and these are not hard and fast rules, but generally 45 to 50, many people get into an empty nester stage, and now you've got to, do I increase my lifestyle or do I increase my retirement savings? We'll talk about that. 60 plus, you got a couple of big decisions that might impact your finances and your planning. Should I buy long-term care insurance? Very, very complex subject and question, but we'll spend some time on that because that's really intriguing. I do have some experience there to share. And then how should I invest my retirement savings? And we've done a separate seminar on that, and Marty will give you a link if you would like to go look at that one. But I think there's some myths that we've all been taught that I'm trying to get rid of. 62 to 70, that range, you have some decisions. Do I still need life insurance or long-term disability insurance? Important during your working years, maybe not so much after 62. And then, of course, at 62, you have an option of taking Social Security early or late at 70. That's a huge issue. When you get to be about 75 or plus, you're thinking about, should I downsize my home? It's getting hard to take care of. And then, of course, when should I retire? That's a huge subject, and that really impacts your planning. And then 75 to 85, you start getting into where am I living? So I consider a retirement living area or facility as an option. And then finally, should I revisit my estate plan? I have some things to say about that. So we'll go through each one of these in some detail. 45 to 50. Most people, again, we experienced this, Marge and I experienced this. When you got to those ages, the kids were out of the house, they through college, we paid for that. And we had a lot more cash flow. And so then you have the issue of, well, do we go ahead and increase our lifestyle, or do we put more money into a retirement savings? And of course, we did a little bit of both, but you have to adjust your financials there, and you have to do it intelligently, looking out a very long time. And again, when you get back to financial planning, that's what those planners need to do for you, is to look long term and say, okay, we start today, what's really going to happen over the next, in this case, maybe 40, 45 years. So yeah, as an empty nester, you have more cash flow. Your temptation is to just go to lifestyle creep. To say, okay, we earn more, we have more cash flow, we'll spend more. That's fine. But on the other hand, and I'll show you a chart on this quickly, the clock is now ticking on retirement savings. So if you haven't saved a lot for retirement before you're 45 or 50, you might be wanting to put the pedal to the metal, so to speak. And that has, again, a big impact on your savings and the adjustments that you can make. A lot of people, and we were a little bit guilty of this, when this area comes where you do have more cash flow, we say, now we can have our dream home. And so now you end up with a nice, beautiful 4-bedroom home, and there are 2 people living in it. So we kind of ended up that way. I said, yeah, this is crazy. Things like active vacationing while you can. I love to vacation. When you're 45 or 50, most people can take very nice active vacations. We did a lot of that. So there's a tension with savings and spending there. And then there's always, the Tesla I always wanted. And actually, I haven't actually wanted a Tesla, but you write your own line in there of what you wanted. And that's in tension with, of course, the time value of money. So again, we took 4 bicycle trips to Europe during that age deal, but there was an opportunity cost. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it today, but if you haven't heard of the rule of 72, you ought to study that. The rule of 72 says you divide the number 72 by the percentage rate of return on your savings, and that will tell you how long it takes to double your money. Okay, so using the Tesla example, you say, well, I'm going to buy the Tesla. I think you can buy one cheaper than 70, but I've used the $70,000. The type I would want would probably cost $70,000. I'm not doing it, okay. But the type I would want would be $70,000. So I can say, okay, now I'm going to buy my Tesla because I'm 50 years old. I got the cash flow. Say, okay, well, what does the rule of 72 tell me? Well, the rule of 72 tells me that in 20 years, my money would double almost three times, right? 7.2 years. So in other words, the $70,000 I spent today on the Tesla, 20 years later would have been, if invested at 10%, to make the math easy, $500,000. So you're giving up the opportunity to have $500,000 in the bank at retirement by buying a Tesla. Okay, so silly example perhaps, but put in your own dollar amount and your own wish list on the lifestyle, and it really is an important decision point. This is one of my favorite graphs that shows the time value of money. This is $1 invested in 1926, and 95 years later in stocks, you're between $9,000 and $25,000 out of $1. But the point is, it takes time, and the earlier you start, the better off you are. So you really have some tensions here between retirement savings and lifestyle creep. And if you can get a long-term financial plan with a CFP, they're going to be able to look at these numbers and say, well, okay, if you creep your lifestyle up a little bit, but put a lot in here, this is the answer throughout your retirement years. Maybe you want to change that. Maybe you can increase it, but it's a time to stop and think at 40 to 45. And most people just don't really think too much about retirement planning and adjusting their lifestyle until they're much later. And 45 to 50, you better get pretty serious about it. Okay, next item, do I need long-term care insurance? And this is an interesting question. If you think about all the insurances you need in your retirement years, long-term care is the one thing that really is not covered anyplace else. I mean, I have a tie-in plan with the Medicare for my health insurance. I don't need life insurance anymore, but long-term care is a big deal. The problem, of course, is that at 60, you ought to start looking at it. You probably won't need it for a long time, but if you wait, the rates increase rapidly as the time of need approaches. And so you have to make a decision well in advance. And it is a complex decision. If you've seen one long-term care contract, you've seen one. I mean, they're very, very complex and very, very different. All I would say is that the current retirees I talk with and know are all glad they have a long-term care policy. The problem is, if you bought it 10, 20 years ago, there were sweetheart deals. And as these insurance companies have found out how much long-term care really costs, they've backed out of the system in droves. And so there are not many people still in the example. But long-term care is a real consideration. I have a friend, for example, just to have one example, whose wife is starting to experience dementia. And so he said, okay, well, I can care for her. That's no problem. I'm here. We're living together. I'm retired. So he's done that. Well, his health has started to go down. And so then he said, well, okay, I'll just have in-house care. That's easy. I don't need to go to a nursing home. I don't need that long-term care. I'll just have in-home care. Well, she needs care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you do the math on that, you have to hire 4 full-time equivalent people to have in-home care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's not going to happen. And then if you look at nursing home, the current rates are around $300 a day. If it's a couple, it's $600 a day. Well, I don't know. That's going to wreck a lot of financial plans, right? So this is a very important decision. There is one other type of long-term care insurance, and that's the one that my wife and I actually chose, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about that later, but that's a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, that gives you that kind of a guarantee for long-term care. So there are really 3 tiers, and you can put yourself in one of those of income and financial situations. There are people who aren't going to be able to afford either long-term care or CCRC. And there again, you just hope that you don't need it. And if you do need it, you've got the safety net of Medicaid that will pay for your nursing care, but you're going to have to spend down your other resources before you are eligible. Second level, if you have $5 million in the bank or more, this would be an irritation, but it's not going to sink you. So you can get it, but you don't really need it. But a lot of us fall into a category where we have some assets we'd like to protect. And so this is an important question for us. The next one is, how should my retirement savings be invested? And that's one of my favorite subjects. There are some common rules of thumb that I think are misleading. For example, there's a rule of 100. You take the number 100, you subtract your age, and the remainder is the percentage that you should be invested in, say, the stock market. The rest of it should be invested in bonds or some very safe investment. Well, you take a real drubbing in terms of rates of return by doing that. By that calculation, I should be 20% in stocks and 80% in bonds or something very safe, CDs or whatever. I'm almost 100% stocks. Now, I've mitigated my risks, so I don't think I'm taking any risk I don't need to take and trying to get the reward. But the rule of thumb, I'm certainly not going to apply that. It is not a one-size-fits-all answer. It's very specific to your needs and your plans. And again, as we've already introduced this subject, the planning horizon may be a lot longer than you think, and not only from your life expectancy, but you have to consider, okay, if I'm going to pass some of my wealth on to the next generation, how long is it going to be before they need to take the money? So your planning horizon might be through your remaining life expectancy and a number of decades before your children or whomever need to take it out. So you're still in a very long-term investment strategy, and this you need to be very, very careful about how you're investing your money. And again, Exposing the Myths of Retirement Investing is available, and Marty can give you a link, I think, to the Johnson County Library website. And it's a 1 hour session, so it's a slog, but I think it's worth going through for that. Here's my favorite chart. It's again pretty busy, but it talks about stocks and bonds and the volatility. And for instance, in any 1 year period, if you're all in the stock market, you could have a decrease in value of 39% or an increase in 47%, and anything in between. So it's very, very volatile. Once you move into 5 and 10 year rolling averages, you're not going to lose money, no matter what if you have the discipline not to sell when this goes down. Here's the chart I wanted to look at. Over any 20-year period, if you had $100,000 to invest, you put it all in stocks, and you be careful how you do that. During this period of 1950 through 2018, you would have earned about 11%. So your $100,000 would have grown to $811,000. Had you been even in a 50-50 portfolio of stocks and bonds, you would have ended up with $542,000. So you say, well, okay, this makes me sleep better at night, but then you have to explain to your potential heirs what happened to the other $250,000 they were going to inherit it, but they didn't. Or if you're really nervous and you go all the bonds, you got a $500,000 difference. So no thanks, I'll take the 811. So enough said about that. So now we're 62 to 70, and we get a couple of really important decisions. One is, do I still need life and disability insurance? When I discovered that I was worth more dead than alive, I canceled all my life insurance policies. I didn't want to tempt Marge in any way to collect on the insurance. But when you get near retirement and you do have retirement savings that your spouse could live on if you did pass away, life insurance, which is very, very important during your working years, no longer is so important. And I dropped all of mine. Don't have any today. Then a long-term disability insurance, that's an interesting deal. In your working lifetime, actually long-term disability is more important than life insurance because you're much more likely to be disabled during your working lifetime than to die. Most people know how much life insurance they have. I went through many of my working years not even knowing whether I had a long-term disability policy through my employer. Certainly didn't have any private policies, but that's very important. Dropping long-term disability policy is a little bit trickier. If you have a flexible retirement date, you could retire today. If you became disabled, then it probably isn't important. If not, this continues to be a very key thing. But if you have to go out and buy it yourself, then that's another consideration, another adjustment in going into your retirement years. The next one in that same category of age is, when should I start taking Social Security? And the general rule is there's a significant penalty for taking it early at age 62. Now, that's a general rule, and I would encourage you to check this out before you get to the age of 62, because that rule may not apply. For example, my wife and I went to the Social Security Administration before she turned 62, because she'd already retired. And we said, well, should she take early retirement at age 62? As it turned out, I wasn't planning to retire until the normal retirement age. And when that happened, she was eligible for 50% of my benefit, which was more than she was receiving if she took the early retirement. So she went ahead and took her early retirement. When I retired, then she automatically bumped up to half of what I was taking, which was more than she got here. So it was really found money. So those kind of quirks. And then if you wait until you're 70 to take Social Security benefits, that's going to be a good deal if your life expectancy is greater than average. So the joke and with all the planners is They say, well, tell me exactly when you're going to pass, and I'll tell you which is the best plan. And obviously you don't know that, but that's the general rule. If you think you're going to live longer than the average actuarial tables, then you better wait till you're 70 if you can. A lot of us have a bird in the hand philosophy. We're uncertain about the future of Social Security. Excuse me. So I took it at the normal retirement age, but that's a very interesting deal. And it can make a big difference. Just delaying a year might make a huge difference in your long-term financial plan. Okay, now here's the big one. When should I retire? And so I look at the term of retirement. My experience was in 2007, I retired. I went on a bike trip in my home state of Ohio with some friends, long story. And then I went back to work part-time, doing what I'm now doing. And so to me, work is defined, I love this definition, it's not mine, I borrowed it from someone else, but work is doing what brings value to others and joy to me. So under that definition, you would never want to actually retire and quit working, but you might want to retire and start doing, going from having to work to wanting to work at whatever your avocation is. So for me, the whole financial planning work that I do is just a joy. It's fun to do. And I work flexible hours, but when should I retire? Well, that's a tough question. When you do retire, I'd give you some counsel. You need a reason for getting up every day. So whether it's a hobby, you need to have several hobbies probably, or a job to go to that's something you want to do. But this is for your own mental health. That's a good recommendation, I think. But it is a very, very important financial decision. And again, if you haven't engaged a financial planning professional, CFP, I would recommend certainly before you make the decision to retire, you should do so, because it's a very, very sensitive decision, because you will have to make some adjustments to your finances at that point in time. And delaying it 1 or 2 years may make a tremendous difference in your overall financial situation. Okay, now talking about some more practical things. At 75 plus, most people are getting to a place where the maintenance of the home and so forth, they get to be kind of a problem. Stairs get to be a problem. So should I downsize my home? And there's some pros for staying in my house. I've got familiar surroundings. I may be in a comfortable neighborhood. I probably have friendly neighbors. I avoid the hassle of moving and decluttering. Took us a year. But the cons are there may be accessibility problems with current homes. Unless you live on a single floor. We ended up in our last home had 5 different levels, beautiful home, but the second time my wife stumbled on the stairs, we said, nah, we better get out of here. Maintenance of the property, I learned to hate. And if you stay in your home, if you need additional care, it will guaranteed it will come at the wrong time. And then you're forced to make quick decisions and a move when that additional care is needed. And you may not be able to choose the ideal time and place to move. So 75, you got to be looking at that. And of course, that has some financial considerations too. If you want to, 75 to 85, people start looking seriously at retirement living options. We chose at 71 to move into Lakeview Village, which is a CCRC out in Lenexa. We were among the younger people there. Most people were about 79, 80, 81 by the time they move in. But there are some better options to staying in your own home. And again, they have financial repercussions, but 75 to 85, you ought to be looking very seriously at this. And I want to go through some of the options. There are a lot of senior independent living, condos, rental apartments, and that sort of thing. And there are some pros there. You avoid the property maintenance, so that's the problem. They're built for seniors. Most of them are handicap accessible, single floor, that sort of thing. And they're generally in quiet neighborhoods because they're, people of that same age group. The cons is that if you need additional care above independent living, you may be forced to move again when that care is needed. So you get the sort of problem of, can I choose the ideal time and place to move? The answer is probably no. The thing that we chose was a continuing care retirement community, a CCRC. The pros there is that all living arrangements are on one campus. So if you need additional care where it's going to be, and you've got all kinds of, I go to my primary care doctor, I walk over. I mean, it's pretty convenient. And you're guaranteed access to all levels of care. So where it's going to be. There's not that last minute decision. The cons here is that you probably are going to need to pass both a health and a financial screen to qualify to get in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if you wait too long and you can't pass those screens, then you may not qualify. And it is not inexpensive. There are a lot of people that just plain can't afford it. But for you who can afford it, it's something that you should consider. Now, to further confuse you, there's a couple of CCRC options that are available here in the Kansas City area. And they're basically the rental, the pay-as-you-go model, or the life care model. The rental, you just pay on a monthly basis. The pros are you only pay for what you need. That's the Liberty Mutual, worst ads in the world. Some of them are kind of funny. You only pay for what you need, but you pay as you go. There's a lower cost of independent living, but if you need assisted living, nursing care, you're going to pay the going rate. So that $300 a day for your nursing care is going to kick in. You know where you're going to go, but you're going to pay. So you're taking a little bit more of a chance. The life care model just gives you this is what we bought into, it gives you the ultimate in long-term care insurance. So you have an unlimited healthcare guarantee. If I have to move from my apartment into nursing care, I get that care for as long as I live. No questions asked, there's no qualification and so forth. And they do that. I continue to pay basically the same rental I'm paying now. So I've got a very predictable cost of living. I don't have to look at this $300 or $600 a day sort of Damocles holding over me. So it's a very, very nice long-term care policy. The cons is there's a sizable entry fee, usually we paid one. And the theory there is that people will take their home equity, trade it in for a lifetime lease. This is what we did. So you're trading at a non-earning asset, your home equity, for a lifetime lease to live in that facility and gain unlimited access to the facilities. But there are more stringent health and financial screens. So if you wait too long, you may not be able to qualify for that. But that's what we did. We did not have long-term care insurance, probably a mistake, but we do have the care that we need. One little thought about estate planning, and again, we visit our estate planning attorney about once every 3 or 4 years. She calls us basically and says, time to come in. And I always say, well, not really, nothing has changed. And then we go in and things have changed. And there's a couple of quotes, and these are from Ron Blue, who's a CFP to the CFPs, has been in the industry forever. And has dealt with these issues. There are a lot of people that say, well, I'm going to leave my estate to my children. And I've got 3 children, I got 4 children and 2 children. I'm just going to give them equal amounts. Ron's counsel is that you need to love your children equally, but treat them uniquely. For example, if you've got children who are very responsible, that when they get their inheritance, they're going to use it wisely. Some other people might have children that aren't quite that responsible, and you might be enabling bad behavior, or you might really be cursing them by giving them a significant amount of money. Our children, we have designated what they believe is a very modest amount to go to them. Most of it goes to charity. So, but they're okay. I mean, they're doing fine. They're doing better than we did when we were that age. Now, I will say we would change that plan in a heartbeat if they had some special needs, or children had some special needs, or grandchildren or great grandchildren. Yeah, we'd change that. Our family is more important. But we love them both. We're going to treat them uniquely. If one of them has special needs, we will, of course, cover that and explain to the other child. So that's something you need to think about. On the giving side, a lot of people have charities in their will. And when you're looking at your financial plans, one of the really interesting things, especially when you get into the 75 to 85 year time frame, thinking, I would like to be charitable. And so the question is, can I afford to give money today and still be okay in my financial plan? Because I'd like to give it away. I'd like to enjoy it. And Ron's quote here is, do your giving while you're living, while you're knowing where it's going, which is kind of a nice way of saying, I'd like to enjoy giving, and I'd like to do that while I'm living. Well, that's another reason for having a long-term financial plan. You need to know that you can do that and still have financial viability for your family and yourself. So that's a key issue. 75 to 85, you ought to be revisiting what that estate plan is in terms of your giving plans. So those are the questions. And so the topic of this is, how do you adjust your finances? Well, there are a couple things. This is the long-term side of that, and we're going to talk about the short-term side later. But I would highly recommend, at least by the time you're 40 or 45 years old, you have engaged a certified financial planner. There are a lot of financial planners out there, but there are only a selected number who are really credentialed. And this certified financial planner, or CFP, is like a CPA, only finance. These guys know what they're doing. They're qualified, and very important to have somebody. Each of these 9 decision points, and you may have others. I mean, these are just the ones that I picked out. Every time you look at one of those decisions and make an adjustment, you need to be making that adjustment to your finances with this long-range plan in mind, and those numbers need to be recrunched every time you run into these decisions and make a decision. So you need to develop a close long-term relationship with that CFP. You need to have a detailed plan that goes out through the rest of your life, year by year by year, and then on into your estate plan. And so normally you'll get into an annual replanning event with them. And then, of course, anything changes during the year, intra-year, any significant changes ought to be reflected in that. So that's just a long-term relationship that you ought to have. The work that I do is really not so much in this area, it's in the next area, and I have a lot of fun doing it. But I call it financial management just the basic blocking and tackling. When you put together a long-term plan for your finances, you have a lot of assumptions. What's inflation going to be like? What are my plans? When am I going to spend significant money? When am I going to retire? All these things get baked into the plan and get adjusted so that as reality hits you year after year, you're constantly replanning. The most sensitive assumption you're going to put in is, what's your lifestyle going to cost? And had some experiences. I was in a meeting with the CFP at one point in time. I used to work in the offices of a group, and they had this couple in, middle-aged, and they were, for the first time, making out a long-term financial plan. And the financial advisor asked them, well, okay, we have to put these assumptions in. What are you going to spend every month, every year in your retirement years? And they looked at each other and looked at the financial advisor and said, well, we don't know. That's why we're here. You tell us, okay? And so he said, okay, that's fair. So let's start with your lifestyle now. How much are you spending each month now? And the gentleman pretty quickly came up and said, well, I think it's about $7,000 or $8,000 a month. And his wife's making some notes, and she's looking over at him and says, I can come up with 14 or 15 pretty quickly here. the financial plan is going to be worthless if you don't know what your current lifestyle is any closer than that. You know, 8,000 a month might have worked very well for them. 15 might have been a disaster. And that's, we find, pretty common. The people just don't know what their lifestyle is today, and they sure aren't tracking it or managing it. So then I talk to people who say, well, why aren't you doing this? Well, it's hard. I mean, it's budgeting, it's, oh my gosh, accounting. It takes a lot of time. It's boring. I hate it. And I say to them, no, it really isn't. And there's again, a shameless plug. There's an introduction to mint.com available on the Johnson County Library website. Mint.com is a miracle. It's a product that is supported by and owned by Intuit, the people who bring you TurboTax, QuickBooks for small business and so forth. The third big product is mint.com. And it is a free to the user software that literally tracks everything in your financial life. And there's nothing really you need to do to gather the information. I have about 50 people that I maintain on mint.com continuously with monthly reports going out and so forth. And even in the second and third meetings I get with people, they say, well, where do I put this data in? I mean, how do I said, you don't do anything. You just let Mint do it. It is really, really neat. And so I have be happy to talk with anybody about Mint. I strongly urge you to look at this introduction to mint.com on the Johnson County website, because it is really a great product. And the point is, we started this whole presentation with the idea of how do you adjust your finances for retirement living. Well, there's two ways. One, you have a long-term financial plan with a financial planner, and you do your work on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis using a budget, collecting data, and managing your finances and adjusting that. I went today, filled up my car with gasoline at $3.49.9 a gallon. Okay, well, that's about $1.50 more than it was a year ago. Is my budget changed? Yes. Do I have to adjust my budget? Yes. So month after month, year after year, we keep track of this stuff. And you've got a long-term plan and you've got a short-term plan adjustments you can make literally month after month. And then at the end of the year, you look at what really happened that year, you back to your long-range plan and say, okay, now my standard of living, my lifestyle isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, probably. Plug that back into your long-term plan. So those are the adjustments you make on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. And if you do that religiously, you're not guaranteed success, but boy, the odds go way up. So that's my pitch. I can help you with this. A CFP can help you with the other side of it. So if you want to talk about this, if you want to talk about any of these subjects, I'd be happy to do that with you. There's my email. We'll let this up for a little bit. If you want to contact me at any time, and again, my total practice is pro bono. I've never charged a client a penny for the last 15 years almost, and 350 plus client families I work with. So I'd be happy to work with you. It's fun for me, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So Marty, if you've got questions coming through, now would be the time. We've got about 15 minutes left. So.
Okay, there we go. We do have some questions. The first one is, any ideas on balancing your retirement priorities when you have aging parents who are under-resourced themselves?
Boy, that's a good question. And again, if you have those obligations, or you may have those obligations, but you're not sure, that should be baked into your long-range financial plan. And the beauty of a CFP and the software they use, they can put together a plan for you. And once that is built, they can then say, what if? So what if you had to use some resources to help them for a period of time? Very easy then to plug those numbers in and say, how does that affect your plan? Is it still valid? How much can you afford before your plan starts to sink you? And so the only answer to that, I think, is to say, you've got to do some what if planning to say, what do we think that would take? What do you think that they would need? Let's plug that in to another option in our plan and see if our plan still works for us. So that's the same kind of a concept as giving. I would like to give money away while I'm still living and I can enjoy the seeing that good things happen. How much can I afford to do that? Well, we can put in some various scenarios and say, okay, at what point in time, if you go beyond that, you're not going to make it. So I would try to assess what those needs of your parents might be and plan to say, let's do a what if. What if we have to support them at this level or that level? What does that mean for our plan? And if then it still works, then you've got peace of mind. But yeah, we usually think about special needs for families, being your children or grandchildren, but it may be your parents, and that should be an important part of your financial plan. Again, that's not what I do, but CFPs do it.
Okay. We have a comment about ACA Health Insurance. They say, I love ACA Health Insurance for the early retirement. In Johnson County, the Blue Cross Blue Shield provider directory is the same as our previous corporate BCBS plan, and with a $7,000 out-of-pocket max.
Wow, that's pretty good. I think our total healthcare costs are running somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 a year, counting premiums and deductions from our Social Security and so forth. So that's a pretty good threshold, 7,000.
Another question: any specific thoughts on how same-sex couples should plan, as they are statistically more likely to have similarly long lifetimes versus male-female couple of the same age?
I would think the planning would be very, very similar, if not exactly the same. I don't know if there are, well, I'm sure there are actuarial studies on that. I don't have any data on that to know what the life expectancy would be. But again, I think it would probably follow the same pattern. It's the same concept. You have a significant other you're living with. Your life expectancy is just going to be longer because you've got care there. You've got relationship, and it should be the same. I've got a couple clients like that, but I haven't done the long range planning with them, so I don't know whether there would be any differences. But I would think it would be very, very similar in terms of life expectancy and the planning process.
Okay, the next question: any recommendations for online retirement analysis tools?
Not really. And I'm biased because I work with people as an advisor. The mint.com thing is wonderful. There are lots of long-term planning tools, but unless you are a CPA or somebody that really has a lot of experience and knowledge and training, it's a minefield. I tell people mint.com is a miracle. It's a wonderful tool. The good news is it's a very powerful tool. The bad news is it's a very powerful tool. And there are 100 ways that you can mess it up so badly, the information will be totally invalid. So I think in any case, you're better off engaging with someone that you can sit across the desk from and ask questions and look at the data and have confidence that you're getting good advice. If you're a CPA, if you have 3 advanced degrees in business and finance, fine. But if not, you're better off having a financial advisor sit down, a planner, and go through these things, I think. And again, I'm biased because I am one. But the tools, I just believe in having individual consultations there. You can use them, but I'd have somebody that's looking over my shoulder.
Another question, what withdrawal strategy do you like?
How much time do you have? That's almost a full hour of the presentation I have on the library system now. So when you get into retirement years, you should have a financial plan that says, I am going to need to withdraw a certain amount every year from my investments. And that is a very, very significant number. Most financial planners will be very comfortable if your average annual withdrawal is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4% of your total investments. I have pushed that to 6 or 7, depending on the strategy. And that's a long, long story. But that's the very sensitive assumption going into that plan. And you have to control it. So what I tell people is have a plan, know what you're going to withdraw, and don't sell any of your investments for any other reason. So you have a plan. My plan for next year is to withdraw X dollars, which is X percent of my investments, say it's 4%, 5%, or whatever. And that's what I'm going to withdraw. The stock market goes up, it goes down like it has lately, doesn't matter. I don't sell for any other reason. If now in the middle of the year, I want to buy the Tesla and it's not in my plan and I've got to sell stock to do it, no, timeout. You don't do that. Next year we'll do the plan again and see what that takes. But you have to have a reasonable withdrawal rate, and you have to stick to it. So that would be my counsel. And if you do that, and if it's a reasonable rate, then your earnings are going to be more than you're taking out, and your principal is going to continue, ideally, to grow slowly, rather than get into a fight between bankruptcy and death.
Okay, another question. Do you recommend hiring a CFP on an hourly basis or as a percentage of your total investments?
Most CFPs, it's an interesting industry. Most CFPs earn most of their money, revenue for their practice, managing money. So most of them will have an hourly rate or a fixed rate to do the initial planning setup. The people I work with will charge a flat fee for the first year, and that's first year is when they put together all the plans, build the models, all that sort of thing. And it could be $1,000, $2,000, very similar to what you run into when you talk to your estate planner. Okay. After that, they don't charge anything on an hourly basis. They just charge a percentage, usually around 1% per year of the amount of money that's managed. That's a very common formula. And most of the people will be in that kind of a range. You can hire somebody to do on at least a flat rate, if not an hourly rate, to do some initial planning. But it's not very helpful. When you engage a CFP, you need to engage them for life. And so they need a revenue stream. And most of the time, that revenue stream after the first year is going to come from them managing assets on a 1%, or if you got more than $1 million, it's negotiable. And I know one CFP that charges an annual planning fee as well as a slightly lower fee based on assets managed, but that's the general rule. And I think you're going to have trouble finding a CFP that's going to go and do a one-off for you. So, and that's a reasonable approach. If they're managing assets, you're probably paying them, well, all in cost of managing those assets probably isn't going to be that much more than just managing them yourself anyway, I think. And the value you get, most of the value that these CFPs provide is in the planning process. They get most of the revenue from managing money. So it doesn't make sense on the surface, but that's the way the industry is developed. It's just easy to collect the money if you're managing assets.
Yeah, related to that, do most CFPs require that you put all of your investments in under their management?
That depends. I think most of them would be happy to manage most of them. As a matter of principle, or just the business plans of these guys, if you have $250,000 to invest, it's probably worth their time. If you have $500,000, it's certainly worth their time. There are some CFPs that have higher limits than that, but most of them will have minimums, because if you're not managing at least $250,000 or $500,000, there just isn't enough revenue to give them a viable business model. And unfortunately, the CFPs usually target the top 5 to 10% of the people in terms of wealth. That's just the way that it works. But you're in business, you've got to make money, and you just can't afford it. That's why I went into the pro bono thing. I didn't want to compete with those guys. And I said, there are a lot of people who need help, but just don't have those kind of resources. So how about I take those guys? And so that's been my practice. But that's the general rule. Most of them will want to manage all your resources. I think I would recommend that you kind of accept that as the ultimate answer, because if you're going to trust them to do your planning and do some of your investments, why would you want somebody else out there? I mean, it kind of gets into a conflicting situation. And if you're not going to trust them to manage all of your assets, then I would question why you're trusting them to manage any of them. It just makes the life a lot simpler for them and much simpler for you, actually. Okay. So I would choose a financial advisor, and if I'm happy with them, I would eventually give them all my money, which is exactly what I've done personally.
A couple more questions. Can you be tax-free in retirement?
Sure, if you don't make any money. The old story is, don't complain about paying income tax. That means you have some income. And so rejoice because you're paying taxes. So half of the people in the United States do not pay any federal income tax. Half. A lot of those get a rebate, a credit. Okay, so now, depending on what state you live in, you may still be paying state tax, but it depends on your income. If you retire and you don't have a very high income, you're probably not going to pay any federal income tax. Half the people in the country don't today. But I would hope that you would, because that would mean you had enough income to retire comfortably and live.
A couple more questions. I'm an accountant. Do I need to use mint.com, or do I have the skills that mint.com uses?
Great question. Great question. In my opinion, so my philosophy on personal finance, and I worked in corporate America for 44 years. And when I get into personal finance, though, I like to use the cash basis of accounting, which is really simple, really basic, but it is brutal. Every month I have a budget. And if the money comes in, I can spend it. If the money doesn't come in, I can't. And so I use a cash basis of accounting. If you use a cash basis of accounting, Mint is all you need. It's much easier, it's simpler. And Intuit used to have an accounting software, and they sold it. Can't remember what it was called now. But anyway, And I looked at that, and I know people have used that. I think it's more complex than it needs to be. Mint is a wonderful cash flow management system, and that's really all you need. And I think it's a preferable way. So I've done some work in accounting. I've got a lot of training in it. I use in personal finance, my own budget. I use a cash basis. If I have the money, I can spend it. If I don't, and it's brutal. So that's what I recommend. And Mint is perfect because Mint is really a cash flow management position. You budget money in and money out every month, and if it comes, you got money to spend. If it doesn't, you don't have it. So
a related question: if you're using a CFP, do you need to use Mint.com?
Okay, great question. So I try to lay out at the end of the presentation how do we adjust, and there's two facets of that. You need a long range plan, but those guys are going to meet with you once or twice a year and look out for the rest of your life. The most sensitive assumption in that long range plan is your lifestyle. And to know what to put into that equation, if it's 8,000 or 4,000 versus 15 versus 12, come on, your long range financial plan is worthless unless you know what it is. So what I'm saying is, number one, if you do the Mint, after 12 months, you will know exactly what you spent for the year. And you do it like I have with clients for 15 years. You know exactly what their lifestyle is. Then you can take that lifestyle and say, okay, I know it's going to change in retirement, but I've got a good base. And quite frankly, my experience is things may move around a little bit when you retire, but they're probably not going to change much. You get used to a lifestyle. You're spending $5,000 a month, $8,000, whatever it is. You just don't turn off the spigot when you retire. You may want to spend more time in vacation, spend more money there. Healthcare is going to continue to rise during your retirement. But if you keep the Mint month by month, year by year, you've got a wonderful record of what your lifestyle is. You're going to be able to plug in a very intelligent number in that long range plan. And in the meantime, your financial planner is going to help you with the long range stuff, but you're responsible. You are your manager. You're your own CFO, if you will, chief financial officer. And your responsibility is to manage that money month to month, year to year, so that you know where your money's coming, where it's going, and you're fitting into your long range plan. So your long range plan assumes you're going to spend $75,000 a year, and you end up spending $125,000. Well, it's not going to work, right? You get the wrong assumptions in. So very, very important. Manage it every month, every year, and you are managing your money. And the nice thing about Mint is, I tell every one of my clients, and Marty can attest to this, I want them to look at Mint once a week, not any more than that. Okay, twice a month would be fine. Don't spend more than 5 minutes in Mint. You don't have to. There's not a lot you do in it. And if you'll spend the 5 minutes every week or two in it, you'll be able to keep it up. I can help clients with problems that come up and arise. And that's all it takes. It really is a cool deal. But it will show you the brutal answer to what really happened in your life. You will know every dollar that came in and where it went. And there are always some surprises. You set this thing up, you start tracking this, every dollar comes in, every dollar comes out, it goes out, and you'll say, I can't believe how much money we're spending in this area. It's always a revelation, always. So both are very important in my opinion. And I'm totally biased.
Well, Emerson, I thank you so much for another wonderful program.
You're welcome.
And I thank all of you for joining us this evening. The recording of this program will be posted on our personal finance online programs archive within the week. And I will plan to send a reminder out to all registrants when it's posted with a link to the programs, the online programs archive. This will allow you to view not only this program, but Emerson's other programs that he's presented on investing and on mint.com. We also have upcoming programs within the next couple of months on personal finance topics that may be of interest to you: public service loan forgiveness, senior housing options, and wills and powers of attorney. And to see more details on these programs and to register for them, go to our events calendar on jocolibrary.org. Thanks again, everyone, and good night.